A massive container ship eases out of Halifax Harbor, its decks stacked with silver-toned aluminum, bound for Hamburg, Germany. Not New York. Not New Orleans. For the first time in decades, Canada is sending less of its aluminum south to the United States, and more across the Atlantic. Why is this happening now? Three forces are driving the shift: Trump's 2025 Section 232 aluminum tariffs, the Canada-EU trade deal known as CETA, and the European Union's carbon border adjustment mechanism set to kick in by 2026. Together, these changes are redrawing trade maps, reshaping supply chains, and forcing companies to rethink where and how they source metals. It's not just about aluminum. This pivot could ripple through industries from auto manufacturing to aerospace, and it could reach all the way to the prices American households pay. So the question is clear: is this just a detour, or the start of a permanent realignment in North American trade? Stay tuned, because the answer will tell us a lot about the future of jobs, prices, and economic power on both sides of the Atlantic. Section 232, Reloaded, 25% to 50%. In 2018, the United States invoked Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, citing national security to impose a 10% tariff on aluminum imports. It was a shock for Canada, America's largest aluminum supplier at the time, but industries eventually adapted. In 2020, the tariffs briefly returned after being lifted, only to be removed again following negotiations. Fast forward to February 2025. The duty came back at 25% on a wide range of Canadian aluminum products. Then, in June 2025, Washington doubled down, raising the rate up to 50% on targeted categories and tightening rules of origin to limit exemptions under the USMCA. This was more than a policy tweak. It was a direct hit to cross-border supply chains that had been optimized for just-in-time delivery. Key sectors felt the impact almost overnight. Automakers faced higher costs for body panels and structural components. The aerospace industry saw price hikes in lightweight, high-strength alloys. Packaging companies, especially beverage can manufacturers, scrambled to secure duty-free supply. Even the construction sector felt pressure, as aluminum windows, siding, and structural materials became more expensive. And under the melted and poured requirement, U.S. buyers couldn't simply reroute through third countries to avoid tariffs. The metal's origin had to be verified from smelter to port. For Canadian producers, the U.S. market suddenly looked less predictable. For U.S. buyers, the price of doing business just went up, and the scramble for alternatives had begun. Canada's counter-tariffs, 13th of March, 2025. On March 13th, 2025, Ottawa fired back. Canada announced a 25% counter-tariff on a targeted list of U.S. goods worth $29.8 billion Canadian dollars. This was not a symbolic gesture. It was a calculated move to match Washington's aluminum duties with equal economic force. The product list was diverse, spanning industrial machinery, steel products, household appliances, and finished consumer goods. For Canadian officials, the message was clear: Canada would not be a passive price taker in this trade dispute. It was a political statement as much as an economic measure, a signal to both domestic industries and international partners that Canada was willing to defend its market. The immediate impact on U.S. companies was sharp. Manufacturers who once relied on Canada as a major export destination suddenly saw their products priced out of competition. In sectors like agricultural machinery, HVAC equipment, and processed foods, Canadian buyers began sourcing from Europe, Asia, or domestic alternatives. For American exporters, the loss wasn't just in sales volume, it was in long-term market share. Once Canadian importers build new supply relationships, those trade patterns are often hard to reverse. In less than a week, the cross-border advantage many U.S. firms had enjoyed for decades began to erode, setting the stage for a deeper and potentially lasting realignment in North American commerce. Cost and carbon edge. Why Canada wins. In the global aluminum market, cost has always been king. But in 2025, cost and carbon are becoming inseparable. And that's where Canada pulls ahead. Canadian smelters, concentrated in Quebec and British Columbia, run almost entirely on hydroelectric power. This gives their primary aluminum a carbon intensity of under 2 metric tons of CO2 equivalent per ton of metal, among the lowest in the world. By comparison, aluminum produced with coal-fired electricity can exceed 8 tons CO2e per ton. Under the EU's CBAM rules, that difference isn't just an environmental talking point, it's a direct cost advantage. High-carbon producers will soon have to buy more CBAM certificates, pushing their prices up. Canadian producers, with their clean profile, can avoid most of those fees entirely. That means they can offer competitive pricing without cutting into margins, a rare case where cleaner also means cheaper. Market signals already reflect this shift. The Rotterdam Premium, a key benchmark for European aluminum, has been climbing as more Canadian shipments bypass U.S. buyers and head for EU ports. European manufacturers are willing to pay more for a supply that offers both price stability and guaranteed emissions compliance. It's a structural advantage that can be locked in through multi-year contracts with automakers, aerospace firms, and construction companies. But there is a caveat. Hydropower depends on consistent water flows, and prolonged droughts, which have already affected parts of Canada, could reduce generation capacity and raise production costs. For now, Canada's blend of scale, low carbon output, and tariff-free access to Europe makes it the preferred partner for industries aiming to decarbonize without sacrificing performance or profitability. In the emerging cost and carbon race, Canada isn't just keeping pace. It's setting the standard competitors will struggle to match. The Canada-Germany corridor. Trade data tells the story of a new aluminum highway quietly taking shape between Canada and Europe. In 2024, Canadian customs records show $18.06 million in aluminum exports to Germany. German import data, however, reports a much larger figure, about $112.7 million for the same period. This isn't a mistake. It's a common phenomenon known as mirror statistics, caused by differences in reporting methods, shipment timing, and product classification codes. Regardless of which number you use, the trend is clear. Shipments are growing. Through the first half of 2025, both Statistics Canada and Eurostat report year-over-year increases in the 8 to 12% range for aluminum heading into Germany. And Germany is just one hub. The Port of Hamburg is emerging as a key gateway for Canadian metal bound for the EU's manufacturing heartland. The Port of Rotterdam in the Netherlands plays a dual role, serving both as an entry point for Northern Europe and as a price benchmark for the entire region through the Rotterdam Premium. Further south, Antwerp in Belgium is ramping up as a logistics and processing center, while Italian ports supply the industrial North's automotive and machinery sectors. This diversification matters. For decades, close to 90% of Canadian aluminum exports went to the United States. Now, by building relationships across multiple European markets, from the Netherlands to Belgium to Italy, Canada reduces the political and economic risk of relying on a single dominant buyer. Even if total export volumes to Europe are still smaller than those to the U.S., each new contract signed in Hamburg, Rotterdam, Antwerp, or Genoa strengthens the corridor's long-term viability. In global trade, shifting even a few percentage points of market share can signal a strategic pivot, one that reshapes supply routes for years to come. Winners and losers. Every trade shift creates clear winners and just as clear losers. On the winning side, Canadian smelters are enjoying a rare moment of leverage. By securing long-term contracts with European buyers, they're no longer just price takers in a US-dominated market. They're setting terms in a climate-regulated one. European automakers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes also benefit. Access to low-carbon aluminum from Canada helps them meet strict EU emissions targets under CBAM without costly offsets or production delays. The aerospace sector in Europe, from Airbus to specialized component makers, gains a stable supply of lightweight, high-strength metal critical to performance. And European logistics hubs, ports like Hamburg, Rotterdam, and Antwerp, see increased traffic, creating jobs and boosting regional economies. But on the losing side, U.S. manufacturers face higher costs and tighter supply. Automakers in Detroit now pay more for body panels. Beverage companies spend more on aluminum cans. Aerospace firms deal with pricier fuselage and wing components. For American consumers, these upstream costs eventually trickle down. Analysts estimate that the combined impact of the new tariffs could add roughly $2,400 a year to the average household's expenses, hitting everything from car prices to packaged food. It's a reminder that trade policy doesn't stay in the abstract. It lands in factory budgets, retail shelves, and family checkbooks. Trump tariffs 2025 aimed to protect U.S. industry. But in this aluminum realignment, Canada and Europe are finding new strengths, while many U.S. buyers are left adjusting to a more expensive reality. Consumer impact: $2,400 per year hit. Trade wars rarely stay confined to boardrooms and cargo ships. They find their way into household budgets. According to estimates from economic research groups, and widely cited by major outlets like The Washington Post and Axios, the combined package of tariffs under Trump tariffs 2025 could add roughly $2,400 a year to the average American household's costs. That figure isn't abstract. It's the sum of hundreds of small price increases across everyday goods. Automobiles are one of the biggest drivers. Higher aluminum costs mean higher sticker prices, as manufacturers pass on the added expense of body panels, engine components, and safety structures. Beverage cans are another. The packaging industry relies heavily on aluminum, and when raw material costs rise, that translates directly into higher prices for soda, beer, and canned food. Appliances like refrigerators, ovens, and microwaves also see price bumps, since aluminum is a core material in both structural and thermal components. Even construction materials, from aluminum siding to window frames, become more expensive, affecting both home builders and DIY renovators. While some of these increases may seem modest on their own, together they create a sustained cost of living pressure. For families already navigating inflation, that extra $2,400 can mean postponed purchases, tighter grocery budgets, or delayed home improvements. In short, the aluminum tariff isn't just a headline about trade policy. It's a steady, visible drain on consumer wallets, a reminder that in a globalized economy, the costs of protectionism often come home in the shopping cart. 3 scenarios and 90-day signals. The next 3 months will be critical in determining whether Canada's aluminum pivot to Europe becomes a steady flow or just a temporary detour. Base case. The most likely scenario is that Section 232 tariffs remain at their current up to 50% levels. Canada continues to expand its EU market share gradually, adding a few percentage points each quarter. Rotterdam Premium stays elevated, signaling steady demand, while U.S. buyers adapt to higher costs. Bull case, CBAM's 2026 enforcement deadline, or a possible earlier industry push, triggers a wave of long-term supply contracts. European automakers, aerospace firms, and construction companies lock in Canadian aluminum now to avoid compliance risks later. Market share for Canada jumps sharply, and production is reallocated toward EU demand. Bear case, political negotiations or legal challenges lead Washington to scale back tariffs, possibly reinstating exemptions or TRQs under USMCA. Some Canadian supply naturally flows back to U.S. buyers, slowing European growth, though existing contracts remain in place. For investors, manufacturers, and policymakers, 4 signals will be key to watch over the next 90 days. Rotterdam Premium, sustained or rising premiums, confirm strong European demand. Comtrade monthly data, HS76, tracks actual shipment volumes from Canada to EU ports. CBAM registry updates. Any change in reporting requirements or enforcement timelines could shift buyer urgency. USTR and Finance Canada notices. Announcements on tariff adjustments, countermeasures, or exemptions will move markets. For businesses, reading these signals early could mean the difference between securing supply at the right price or scrambling to catch up when the trade winds shift. Canada's aluminum shift to Europe started as a reaction to the sharp bite of U.S. tariffs. Now, with CETA clearing the tariff path, CBAM rewarding low-carbon production, and European demand rising, this detour is looking more like a deliberate new course. Canadian smelters are securing premium contracts, EU industries are locking in clean supply, and the trade map between North America and Europe is being redrawn in real time. So, will Canada ever rely on the U.S. market the way it once did? Or has it found a stronger, more stable future across the Atlantic? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay ahead of every twist in Section 232, CBAM, and the global aluminum trade, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and join us for the next update, because the next policy shift could change everything again.